Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have the third parsha in the Torah, Lech Lecha. We're introduced to Abraham really for the first time. We saw his name last week, but really this is our first introduction to him. So I want to ask a question. How would we react if this is nothing that we can conceptualize, but how would we act if God spoke to us face to face, so to speak? If God spoke to me like the person next to you, or like the wall in front of you, totally real, how would we act? How would we respond? Would there be any doubt? Interesting. So this is how, just think about that. This is how the Torah first introduces us to Abraham. And God said to Abram, his name wasn't Abraham at the time, it was Abram, "Go forth from your land and from your birthplace, from your father's house, the land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will give you a great name, and you shall be a blessing." Now, what's interesting is that the term Lech Lecha is what's used in this very first sentence, is that God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha, go for yourself. The commentators say, among many other reasons, one of the things that the go for yourself means is that Abraham, do this to benefit yourself. What that means is that, again, Abraham is considered such a righteous person because he wasn't just the only monotheist in the world, but he basically went ahead and taught the world about monotheism, unlike Noah, who last week we discovered no matter how righteous he was, he stumbled and he lost the opportunity that he should have had to save the world. But here Abraham, it's very interesting, Abraham is met by God face to face. And what makes Abraham righteous? Is it that he listened to God? The Torah tells us because he was obedient. Well, obviously he was obedient. What would you expect otherwise? God speaks to him face to face. Would you expect that he wouldn't listen to him? No. Rather, what's so righteous about Abraham is two things. One of them, his reaching out, and I'll get to that in a second, but the other one is his concept of Lech Lecha, do it for yourself. Because as I said, if God comes to Abraham face to face, so to speak, and starts telling him, leave your house and go elsewhere, he's going to do it. He knows who God is, and there's no doubt this isn't some philosophical reality. God is speaking to him face to face. So Abraham, so to speak, isn't getting brownie points for that. It's obvious he would do that. The point is he's getting brownie points because he's doing it Lech Lecha for himself. What that means is that he's not doing it out of pure fear, out of pure, awe that, oh, God tells me to do this, I have to do this, otherwise I'm going to get a zap. He's doing it because he knows that if God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, we read that 12 chapters ago, is telling him to do this, then he knows it's best for him. And if he knows that it's best for him, then he's doing it for himself. And that the lesson for us is that so often we treat mitzvot, commandments, biblical commandments and obligations as just that, as a yoke, as a burden. And that's completely the wrong perspective, not only because it's not a healthy way of living, but because it makes no sense. Because if God, as we read a few chapters ago, created the heavens and the earth, and indeed any being, beyond time and space of infinite nature, this God does not become more or less if I keep kosher or not. He does not become more or less if I pray or I keep the Sabbath day or not. It is purely for my benefit. So what that means is that if God is telling the Jewish people in the Bible, he's saying keep the Sabbath day, keep the laws of kashrut, pray every day, wear tzitzit, wear tefillin, etc., it's not for his benefit. He doesn't become less or more God. It's for our benefit. And if we can approach it with that kind of a perspective, then I think we can have a much, much more deep and relevant and meaningful Jewish experience. And so that's one area in which Abraham was righteous. And the other one was that, as we read next week's Parsha, he had an outward focus. So unlike Noah, he had an outward focus. And it's in next week's Parsha, but basically after Abraham has his circumcision, 3 days later, he has these 3 desert wanderers come into his tent. Now we later find out that these are angels, but what that means is that Abraham, at 99 years old, after having enduring a circumcision, he has that outward focus, and he is literally talking to God, beginning of chapter 18, and he says, hold on, God, I need to speak to these people, and he runs out. Why? How could anyone, why, if you were talking to God face to face, would he run away and all of a sudden start talking to these people? The point is that he knew there was such an obligation on his shoulders to reach out to teach this message to humanity, because he knew that if he did not do it, no one else would. And he knew that if he did not teach this message to humanity, that humanity would never get that message. And that's the message that Noah didn't have last week, is that ultimately what he did was, he built the ark, but he didn't understand that it was his obligation to try to save humanity. And so that's where Abraham passed. Abraham passed because he knew he was the only person who possessed this message, and if he didn't do it, the world would never get it. And so the take-home message for us in this video is two things, is that one, like Abraham, we should treat all divine relation with us in terms of commandments as an obligation, but as a positive obligation, as something to be cherished and to be enjoyed, not as something to be feared. And on the other hand, at the same time, we should understand that what we have is an incredible opportunity, an incredible privilege, and a responsibility at the same time. If we think that there's value in Judaism, if we think that there's value in doing what God asked us to do, we need to be living that with an outward perspective and knowing that, our fellow Jews and others who don't have this, we feel they're missing something. Because if we don't feel they're missing something, then I'm not really sure that what we think we have in the first place. And that's the point, is that Abraham knew he possessed something real. It was something true. And he knew that he really, for his own benefit, to teach the world, because he would be getting the merit of that. So if we could approach, indeed, our lives with the same perspective that Abraham had, I think we're off to a good start. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom, God bless.